Don't let go of me, the little girl whispered against his chest, her fingers digging into the leather of his jacket like she was holding onto the edge of the world itself. Please don't let go. Jackson Carter hadn't let go. Not when his shoulder shattered on impact. Not when his ribs cracked under the weight of catching 60 pounds of falling child. Not when the crowd surged around him and the screaming started. He stayed on his knees on that concrete sidewalk, holding her, and the only thing he said back was the only thing that mattered. I got you. You're safe. I got you. Before we go any further, if this story already has your heart pounding, hit that subscribe button right now and follow along with me to the very end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. It was a Thursday afternoon in mid-October. The kind of cold that crawls under your collar and reminds you that winter doesn't ask permission before it arrives. The streets of Brookhaven were quiet, the way small American cities go quiet on weekdays. A few cars moving slow, a woman walking a dog, a delivery truck double parked outside a bodega on Clement Street. The trees along Ridgemont Avenue had already dropped most of their leaves, and what remained clung to the branches with the kind of stubborn determination that doesn't make a difference in the end. Jackson Carter Jacks, to every person who'd known him longer than 10 minutes, was riding south on Ridgemont when he heard it. He'd been on his Harley-Davidson Road King for going on 23 years, and in that time he'd developed a particular sensory sharpness that longtime riders develop without trying. You hear the road differently when your life depends on reading it. You feel the air shift before a car door opens in your lane. You notice things other people filter out. So when the scream came, one single high-pitched scream from somewhere above and ahead of him, Jax didn't process it as background noise. He processed it as a signal, the way you process a gun being cocked in a quiet room. Every nerve ending, he had went live at once. He looked up. He saw her. She was 15 floors up, a small shape in yellow against the gray ski arms windmilling, hair catching the air, and she was falling. Jax had exactly one thought, and it wasn't a thought so much as a reflex that had been wired into him through decades of brotherhood, through years of riding toward trouble instead of away from it, through every single moment in his life, when the choice between action and hesitation had meant the difference between someone living and someone not. He threw the bike. I didn't stop it, didn't ease it down, didn't park it. He let it go, 800 pounds of chrome and steel scraping across the asphalt, and he ran. People on the sidewalk were frozen. Every one of them stood with their mouths open and their feet nailed to the ground, watching this small girl drop through 15 stories of open air, with their hands raised to their faces and no muscle in their body willing to move toward her. That's what shock does. It takes ordinary people and turns them into statues at exactly the moment when the world needs them to be something else. Jax was not frozen. He covered the distance from the road to the building's entrance in seconds, his eyes never leaving her, calculating in some animal part of his brain that had nothing to do with thought and everything to do with survival, instinct, her speed, her trajectory, where she was going to be when she arrived at ground level. He threw himself into position with both arms outstretched, and he caught her. The sound was like nothing he'd ever heard in his life. It wasn't a soft landing. It wasn't a movie catch where the hero absorbs the impact with clean cinematic grace. It was bone meeting, bone weight meeting, resistance, physics announcing itself without apology. His right shoulder detonated, that was the only word for it. Detonated, the joint separating with a tearing sensation that set his entire right side on fire. Two of his ribs on the left cracked under the compression of his arm, snapping tight around her. He went to one knee, and then both knees, and the concrete came up hard. But his arms stayed closed. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to react to the pain, to release, to do what his nervous system was demanding he do. He overrode every bit of it. He pulled her closer instead. She was alive. He could feel her breathing, rapid, terrified, but breathing. She was maybe 5 years old, blonde hair, a yellow sweater with a cartoon duck on the front. And she was shaking so hard that her teeth were chattering, even in the seconds after impact, her small hands grabbing fistfuls of his leather jacket with a grip that was almost comical, coming from such tiny fingers. "Don't let go of me," she whispered. And Jackson Carter, 48 years old, full-patch member of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, a man who hadn't cried in front of another human being in longer than he could honestly remember, felt something happen in his chest that had nothing to do with the broken ribs. "I got you," he said. "You're safe. I got you." The crowd finally unfroze. People rushed in, voices overlapping, someone calling 911, someone else dropping to their knees beside him and asking if he was okay. Jax didn't answer any of them. His eyes were on the little girl's face. Her eyes were blue, the kind of pale blue that looks silver in certain light, and they were fixed on his with an expression he'd seen on people before, though never on someone this young. She was looking at him the way people look at the first solid thing they grab hold of when they're drowning. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer for a moment. Then, barely audible, "Lily." "Lily." He said it back to her like it mattered, like her name was something worth treating carefully. "I'm Jax. You're going to be okay, Lily. You hear me? You're okay." A police officer arrived and tried to take her from him, and Lily screamed, not a scared scream, a refusing scream, the kind children produce when something they're holding on to is being taken away, and her grip on his jacket tightened. Jax looked at the officer over her head. "Give her a second," he said. "She's not ready." The officer hesitated, then stepped back. By the time the ambulance came, Jax had his arms so far gone he could barely feel it anymore. The EMTs were asking him questions he was only half answering because his attention was divided between the pain, which was significant, and Lily, who had finally stopped shaking, but still had not released his jacket. It took 3 minutes of gentle coaxing from a female paramedic named Rosa before Lily allowed herself to be transferred to the gurney. Even then, she kept her eyes on Jax, watching him the way you watch a door after someone promises they'll be right back. "Are you coming?" she asked. He looked at her. He looked at the paramedics. He looked at his arm, which was hanging at an angle that arms aren't supposed to hang at. "Yeah," he said, "I'm coming." They put him in the bay next to hers at Brookhaven Regional. The emergency room doctor, a compact, no-nonsense woman named Dr. Aisha Mendez, looked at the x-rays and told him with professional directness that his shoulder joint was fully displaced, 2 ribs were cracked, and she was going to need to sedate him to relocate the shoulder back into position. "I'll wait," Jax told her. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'll wait on the sedation. Tell me about the girl first." Mendez studied him for a moment, the way people study something they're trying to categorize. A large, tattooed man in a cut covered in patches sitting on an exam table with his right arm hanging wrong, declining pain management because he wanted information about a child he'd caught on a sidewalk 20 minutes ago. She decided apparently that this did not require further analysis. "The child is stable," she said. "Minor abrasions, some bruising. She's extremely lucky." "She's alive because of him," Rosa the paramedic said from the doorway, then seemed to catch herself and step back. Dr. Mendez looked at Jax. "That's not in question." "Then I'm ready," he said. "Do the shoulder." They gave him a local block rather than full sedation at his insistence. And while they worked on his shoulder, a procedure that involved physical manipulation that the doctor described clinically and that Jax experienced as approximately 10 seconds of the worst pain of his adult life, he kept his jaw locked and his focus pointed at the ceiling tiles and thought about Lily in the next bay. When it was over and he was taped, embraced, and technically supposed to be resting, he got off the exam table, ignored the nurse who said he absolutely should not be walking, and went to stand in the doorway of the bay where Lily was. She was asleep. The monitor showed everything working the way it was supposed to. A nurse was charting beside her. The room was quiet. Jack stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her breathe, and something that had been wound tight in his chest since he'd seen her falling finally released. He went back to his bay and sat down and let them tape his ribs. Emily Parker arrived at the hospital 3 hours and 47 minutes after her daughter fell off the balcony of their apartment. Jax knew the math because he'd been aware of the time since the moment he arrived. 3 hours and 47 minutes was a long time, long enough to notice. He heard her before he saw her, a voice in the corridor, high and unsteady, asking rapid questions that the nursing staff was trying to answer all at once. Then she appeared in the doorway of the pediatric bay where Lily had been moved, and Jax got his first look at Emily Parker. She was younger than he expected, mid-30s maybe. Dark hair pulled back in the kind of hurried ponytail that says "I did this in the car." She was wearing a blue blazer over a white work shirt with a coffee stain near the second button, which told him she'd come straight from somewhere professional without stopping to change. She had the look of someone who'd been crying in the car and had done the minimum necessary to get herself functional before walking through the hospital doors. Reddened eyes, shoulders carrying tension that had nowhere to go. Jaw set in the way people set their jaws when they're holding themselves together by pure decision. She stood at Lily's bedside with her hand pressed flat against her daughter's cheek, and Jax watched the way Emily's eyes moved over the child, checking, cataloging, searching for everything that was wrong, and processing the fact that it wasn't as bad as she'd feared, and the tension in her shoulders dropped half an inch. Not all the way, half an inch. "She's going to be okay," a nurse told her. "Dr. Mendez will be in shortly." Emily nodded but didn't speak. It was another minute before she seemed to register that there was a large man sitting in the chair against the wall of the room. His right arm in a brace, a split lip beginning to bruise, watching her with calm, dark eyes. She startled, took a step back involuntarily. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice had gone from unsteady to sharp in about half a second. "Name's Jax," he said. "I'm the one who was outside when she came down." Emily Parker looked at him the way most people look at him when they first encounter him in an unexpected context, taking in the size, the leather, the tattoos, the general presentation of a man who does not look like the people you find in hospital waiting rooms. He'd spent enough years in this body to read people's first impressions of him accurately, and he read hers, danger unknown, out of place. Then something shifted. A nurse had apparently said something to Emily in the hallway, or the doctor had, because Emily's expression went through several changes in about 4 seconds. The wariness, then something moving underneath it, then a crack opening in the surface of her face the way ice cracks when the pressure underneath finally gets to be too much. "You caught her," Emily said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Emily Parker sat down on the edge of the chair beside her daughter's bed, and she put her face in her hands, and she shook. Not crying exactly, more like the body executing a function it had been holding back for 3 hours and 47 minutes, and now that she'd confirmed her daughter was breathing, and the man responsible was sitting 4 feet away, it had decided it couldn't hold on any longer. Jax didn't move. He didn't say anything. He understood that some moments don't require filling. After a while, she raised her head. Her eyes were wet, but her voice had come back steady. "Your shoulder," she said. "It's been relocated. I'll be all right." "They said you, She stopped. Started again. "They said you threw your motorcycle." "I did." "To run to her." "Yeah." Emily looked at him for a long time. "Why?" Jax considered the question. The way he considered questions that didn't have neat answers, not dismissing it, not deflecting, but actually sitting with it for a moment and deciding what the honest response was. "Because she was falling," he said, "and I was there." Emily didn't say anything to that. She turned back to her daughter and put her hand over Lily's small one where it rested on the blanket. He came back the next day. He told himself it was just to check. Make sure the kid was doing okay. Normal thing to do, he told himself, when you've been involved in something like that. He'd be in and out. He was there for 2 hours. Lily woke up about 40 minutes after he arrived, and the first thing she did was look around the room with the rapid eye movement of someone checking whether the thing they're afraid of is present. When her gaze landed on Jax in the chair, something in her face went calm. "You came back," she said. "Told you I would." She considered this. "Then you're very big." "I've been informed of that, yes. Like a bear. People have said worse." She almost smiled. It was a small, careful thing, the kind of smile that belongs to a child who's learned to be cautious about when she produces them. "Bears aren't scary," she said. "Not if you know them." "That's true. I'm going to call you Jax Bear." He had been called a lot of things in his life. Most of them were not complimentary. He decided, sitting in that hospital room with his arm in a brace and his ribs wrapped tight, that Jax Bear was the best name anyone had ever given him. "That works," he said. "Yeah." On the 3rd day, he brought a coloring book. He wasn't sure what 5-year-olds colored. He asked the woman at the drugstore checkout, who looked at him with visible surprise, and then helped him pick out a book with dinosaurs because apparently that was universal. Lily accepted the coloring book with both hands and an expression of absolute seriousness, like she was receiving something of diplomatic importance. "These are very good dinosaurs," she said. "I had help picking it." She selected a blue crayon and began working on a stegosaurus with focused attention. Jax sat in his chair. The television was off. Emily had gone to get coffee. The room was quiet in a way that felt comfortable rather than empty. He watched the way she colored, staying carefully inside the lines, which surprised him, given her age, and he noticed other things too. The way he'd always noticed things, the habit of observation that years on the road had turned into something close to a sixth sense. He noticed that she kept the crayon in her left hand, but kept her right hand curled against her chest when she wasn't using it. He noticed that she went still every time footsteps came close to the room door, a split-second freeze before checking to see who it was. He noticed that when a male nurse came in to check her monitors, she watched him with a particular quality of attention that was different from the way she watched female staff. Not exactly fear, but readiness. The readiness of a creature that has learned to track certain things very carefully. He filed all of it away and said nothing. It was on the fourth day that Emily mentioned Ryan. She was talking about logistics, returning to work, managing the apartment, getting Lily transitioned out of the hospital, and she said Ryan's been handling things at home with the particular neutrality people use when they're sharing information they haven't fully processed yet. Ryan, Jack said, my boyfriend. Emily paused. He's been helpful. The pause was almost nothing, less than a second, but Jax had spent his life reading pauses. That's good, he said. Lily had stopped coloring. Just for a moment, just long enough for Jax to notice because he was watching for it now. She'd stopped coloring when Emily said Ryan's name, and her right hand, which she'd been keeping curled against her chest, pressed more tightly. There and then she picked the crayon back up and continued. 3 seconds. 4 seconds maybe. Jax looked at the girl. The girl looked at her dinosaur. He said nothing. That evening, after Emily had gone to handle something at the nurse's station and the room was quiet again, Lily was working her way through her third dinosaur, and Jax was reading a 2-day-old sports section he'd found on a waiting room chair when she said without looking up, Ryan says I'm a baby if I cry. Jax lowered the paper, slowly. Ryan says that to you. When I cry about things. She kept coloring. He says babies cry and I'm not a baby. What kind of things do you cry about? She was quiet for a moment. The crayon moved in careful strokes. Things that are scary, she said finally. Jax held that answer in his head and did not let his face do anything with it. Everybody gets scared sometimes, he said. Even big people. Ryan's not scared of anything. Everybody's scared of something. They just don't always show it. Lily looked up at him then directly with those silver blue eyes, and she said something that he replayed in his head for the rest of that night and many nights after. Ryan said if I was brave enough, I could fly. The room was very quiet. Jax put the paper down on the chair beside him and looked at her steadily. He said that to you. Not a question, a statement he was confirming. Before, she said, and then as if she was explaining something that should have been obvious on the balcony. She looked back at her dinosaur and added a purple tail. Jackson Carter sat very still in that hospital chair, with his cracked ribs and his relocated shoulder and the sound of the monitors beeping steadily. And he felt something happen in his gut that was not grief and was not anger, exactly, though it contained the seeds of both. It was the feeling of something clicking into place, a click that was also a door swinging open on a dark room you had not expected to be there. He'd spent the first 4 days believing it was an accident. I didn't believe that anymore. He didn't tell Emily. Not that night. He needed to think. He needed to be sure about what he knew versus what he suspected, and he needed the distinction to be clean before he put it in front of anyone else. He'd been in enough situations where assumptions move faster than facts to know that moving on instinct alone was how innocent people got hurt and guilty people walked away. So he rode back to the clubhouse, and he sat at the bar with a cup of black coffee. He'd stopped drinking years ago, but he still liked the ritual of the bar. The smell of the place, the weight of it, and he thought. Ryan Cole had taken a 5-year-old girl out onto a balcony 15 floors above a sidewalk and told her she was brave enough to fly. There were 2 ways to read that. There was the reading where it was a careless adult saying something thoughtless to a child who didn't understand the danger, a terrifying accident born from stupidity rather than intent. And there was the other reading. Jax had been around enough bad men in his life to know that bad men were not always loud. They were not always obvious to us. The worst ones were patient. They wore faces that fit the room they were standing in. They said things that sounded like one thing to the people watching and meant something else entirely to the person they were aimed at. He was thinking about Lily's right hand curled against her chest when Ryan's name entered the room. I was thinking about the quality of stillness in her face, not a child's stillness, but an older stillness, a learned stillness. He was thinking about a little girl who colored inside the lines with focused care, and watched male strangers with the eyes of something that had learned what approaching danger looks like. He put down the coffee and found Frank Dawson sitting 3 stools down reading his phone. "Frank," he said. Frank looked up. Frank Dawson was 53 years old, former Brookhaven PD, 15 years on the job before he put in his papers and ended up by a route that made sense if you knew Frank as a full-patch member of the Hells Angels. He had the institutional knowledge of a cop and the independent judgment of a man who decided that institutions weren't always where justice lived. "You look like you're thinking about something that's going to make my evening complicated," Frank said. "I need you to run a name." Frank set his phone down. "Tell me." "Ryan Cole, Emily Parker's boyfriend. I need everything." Frank studied him for a moment. "This about the little girl?" "Yeah." "How bad do you think it is?" Jax picked up his coffee again. "I think we need to know before we decide how bad it is." Frank picked up his phone and started making calls. Tyler Brooks had been with the club for 4 years and was, by any honest assessment, the most technically capable person in the building. He was 27 years old, grew up in a household with 3 older brothers and a mother who worked 2 jobs and had taught himself everything he knew about computers and databases and the art of finding information that other people believed was buried. By 10 o'clock that night, Tyler had everything they could pull from public records and court databases and the particular gray areas between them that Tyler navigated without comment. He laid it out on the table in the back room without editorializing, because Tyler understood that his job was to find the facts and let the people who'd been doing this longer decide what to do with them. Ryan Cole, 39 years old, no prior criminal convictions, but here was what the record showed between its lines in the way that records show things when you know how to read them. 2 previous relationships, both with single mothers. First relationship ended when the woman's 6-year-old son fell from a second-floor fire escape and broke his arm. Investigation found no wrongdoing. Accident. Second relationship, different city 3 years later. The woman's 8-year-old daughter fell from a playground structure and suffered a concussion and a fractured wrist. Investigation found no wrongdoing. Accident. A child falling while in the care of Ryan Cole's household. And now Lily, 15 floors. 3 incidents. 3 different cities. 3 different children. 3 verdicts of accident. The back room was very quiet when Tyler finished. Frank was the first to speak. "Nobody made the connection. Different jurisdictions," Tyler said. "Different departments. No cross-referencing." Jax looked at the papers on the table. He looked at the names of the children, actual names in the files, because Tyler had pulled the originals, and he looked at the dates and he calculated the distance between Ryan Cole's careful movements and the bodies they'd left behind. "He's been doing this a long time," Jax said. "Long enough to know how to stay invisible," Frank said. "Every time he was close enough to be responsible, but not close enough to be charged. He chose single mothers," Jax said. "Women under financial pressure. Women who needed the relationship to work." Frank nodded slowly, because they wouldn't push too hard on the questions. The room held that for a moment. "Lily survived," Tyler said. "She's the only one who survived a fall." Jack stood up and put on his jacket. "Which means she's the only one who can tell us what happened." Frank looked at him. "She's 5 Jacks." "She already told me," Jack said. "I just need to figure out how to make it count." He left the clubhouse and got back on his bike, and he rode through the empty streets of Brookhaven with the cold air hitting him and the names of 3 children cycling through his head, and somewhere on the ride back to the hospital, not to go in, just to be close, just because he needed to be close. He made a decision about Ryan Cole that wasn't about anger and wasn't about revenge, though it touched both. It was about patience. It was about doing this right. It was about making sure that when it ended in a way that couldn't be undone. He owed Lily that much. He owed all 3 of those children that much. He parked across the street from the hospital and sat on the bike in the dark for a while, looking up at the lights in the pediatric wing, thinking about a little girl coloring a stegosaurus with a blue crayon and saying with the matter-of-fact certainty of a child who has not yet learned to dress the truth in softer clothing. Ryan said if I was brave enough, I could fly. Before. On the balcony, he sat there until the cold got serious, and then he started the bike and rode home, and when he got there, he lay in the dark of his room with his arm aching and his ribs aching and something else in his chest that ached in a way that had nothing to do with broken bones, and he stared at the ceiling and thought, I'm going to end this. Not with anger, with everything he had. Emily called him at 7:30 the next morning. Her voice had a new quality in it, tighter, more controlled, working to stay level. "Jax, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Ryan came by the hospital last night." A pause. "After visiting hours." Jax was very still. "Did they let him in?" "He talked to the front desk. He left a message for the nurse to tell me." Another pause longer. "He said he's worried about how much time you're spending with Lily." "Is that what he said?" "He said he doesn't know who you are and that I should be more careful about who I'm letting spend time with her." Jax let the pause breathe. He was thinking about Ryan Cole standing at a hospital front desk, leaving a message that put him, Jax, on the defensive, that shifted the question from what Ryan had done to what Jax was doing, that reframed the entire situation in about 48 hours before Jax had a chance to build a counter-narrative. Smart, patient. He'd done this before. "What do you think?" Jax asked. Emily was quiet for a moment. "I think you saved my daughter's life," she said, and her voice had something raw at the edges when she said it. "And I think Ryan has never once come to the hospital to see her." Jax closed his eyes briefly. "Emily," he said, "I need you to do something for me. Can you do that?" "What?" "Don't tell Ryan when I'm visiting. Don't mention what we talk about. Don't tell Lily to stop talking to me about things she brings up on her own." He paused. "Can you do that?" A long silence. "What do you know?" Emily said quietly. "Not enough yet, but I'm working on it, and I need you to trust me for a little while longer." The silence stretched out between them. "Okay," Emily said finally. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Okay." Outside his window, the sky over Brookhaven was the particular flat gray of October mornings, and somewhere across town, Ryan Cole was waking up in Emily Parker's apartment, and the clock was running, and Jax Carter, who had thrown a motorcycle and broken his shoulder, catching a falling child and was not finished yet, not even close, picked up his coffee and started making his own plans. Frank Dawson called him at noon the next day with a voice that had gone flat in the particular way it went flat when Frank had found something that made him angry and had decided not to be angry yet because there was still work to do. "I need you to come in," Frank said. "How bad?" "Come in, Jax." Jax was already putting on his jacket before the call ended. Tyler had the files spread across the back table and a legal pad full of notes in his precise, cramped handwriting. Frank was standing with his arms crossed and his jaw set. Two other brothers, Marcus Webb and Danny Reyes, were seated along the wall, quiet in the way men go quiet when something serious has settled into the room, and everyone understands that what gets said next is going to matter. Jack sat down and looked at the files. Tyler started talking without preamble because Tyler understood that Jax didn't need context set up for him. He needed information delivered cleanly and fast. "I went deeper on the first incident," Tyler said. "The boy, the 6-year-old with the broken arm, his name was Noah. His mother's name was Karen Solis, Dayton, Ohio, 7 years ago. The fall happened on a Sunday afternoon while Ryan was the only adult in the apartment. Karen was working a double shift. Ryan told police that Noah had been climbing on the furniture and fell off the windowsill." "Story check out?" Frank asked, even though they both knew the answer. "Police report says the window screen was removed. Ryan told them the screen had been loose for weeks. Nobody could contradict that." Tyler turned a page. Karen Solis signed a statement supporting Ryan's account. The investigation closed in 11 days. Jax looked at the paper. "And after by him, Ryan and Karen stayed together for another 4 months. Then he left, took some money she'd been saving, she'd added him to her account, and relocated to Cincinnati." The room was quiet. "Second incident," Tyler continued. "The girl in Cincinnati, Maya, 8 years old, playground fall. The fracture was in her left wrist, but the emergency room doctor noted in the file, and this is the part that didn't make it into the police report, that the injury pattern was inconsistent with a simple fall from playground equipment. Her words were more consistent with a forced hyperextension. She flagged it for follow-up." "Someone talked her out of it," Frank said. "There's a note in the file 3 days later. Doctor amended her assessment, listed it as consistent with an unwitnessed fall. Signed." Tyler looked up. 2 weeks before that amendment, Ryan had spoken with the hospital's patient relations office. Formal complaint. Said the doctor had accused him unjustly and caused additional trauma to the family. Jax didn't say anything for a long moment. "He pressured a doctor into amending her findings," Marcus said from the wall. "It wasn't a question either. He was very controlled about it, Tyler said. No threats on record, just a formal complaint filed correctly through the right channels. The kind of thing that makes an institution nervous enough to smooth things over. Frank looked at Jax. This man knows exactly what he's doing. He's practiced, Jax said. He's been doing this long enough to know every pressure point, which complaints to file, which accounts to access, which stories hold up and which ones don't. He leaned forward on the table, and he knows how to pick his women. Single mothers, Danny said from the wall, financial pressure, no support system. Women who need the relationship to work badly enough that questioning it feels like a risk they can't afford. Jax looked at the files. Emily Parker, 34 years old, works reception at a medical billing company. Lily's father has been out of the picture since Lily was 18 months old. No child support on record. Emily carries the rent, the child care, everything on one income. He paused. Ryan moved in 6 months ago. 6 months, Frank said. 6 months is enough time, Jack said. Enough time to make himself necessary. Enough time to get his names on things. Enough time for Lily to be afraid of him in ways she doesn't have language for yet. He sat back in the chair. His shoulder was throbbing in the way it had been throbbing for 5 days, a dull, constant insistence that he was not as healed as he needed to be. And he pressed his hand against his side and thought about Lily saying, Ryan says I'm a baby. If I cry with the careful voice of a child who has learned to report facts without the emotion that belongs to them, because the emotion makes things worse. We can't go to police yet, Frank said. The pattern is there, but it's circumstantial. Different jurisdictions, no cross-referencing, no charges filed. A good defense attorney picks this apart in 20 minutes. I know. So what do? Jax looked at the papers. We document everything from here forward. We find Karen Solis and the mother in Cincinnati, and we find out what they didn't put in their statements. We make sure Emily knows enough to protect herself without tipping Ryan off that we're building something. He paused. And we make sure Lily is never alone with him again. Frank looked at him steadily. That last part, you're going to need Emily for that. I know. Which means you need to tell her more than you told her this morning. I know that too. I went to the hospital that afternoon with the weight of everything he'd just heard sitting in his chest like Riverstone. Lily was awake and had graduated from dinosaurs to a coloring book featuring various breeds of dogs, which she was approaching with the same methodical intensity she brought to everything. Emily was in the chair beside her working on something on her phone, and she looked up when Jax came in and searched his face the way people search faces when they suspect what they find there is going to be hard. Hi, Jax Bear, Lily said without looking up from a golden retriever she was rendering in yellow with absolute precision. Hey kid, how's the shoulder? I don't have a hurt shoulder. That's true, lucky you. He sat in his usual chair. He noticed that it had become his usual chair and filed that away without deciding what it meant. How are you feeling? Better. She selected an orange crayon and began on the dog's collar. I want to go home. The word home moved through the room and settled differently on everyone in it. Emily looked at her phone. Her jaw was doing the thing where it held tension in the hinge. Maybe a couple more days, she said, keeping her voice easy. Lily accepted this without argument, which was itself the kind of acceptance that comes from a child who has learned that arguing about certain things doesn't change them. Jax looked at Emily. Can I talk to you in the hall for a minute? Emily looked at Lily. Lily was coloring. Emily stood up. In the corridor, under the fluorescent lights, Emily crossed her arms over her chest and looked at him with a directness that he'd noticed about her early and that he respected. Emily Parker, when she wasn't scared, had a precision to her attention. She looked at things the way you look at things when you intend to see them accurately and not the way you wish they were. Tell me what you know, she said. I found some things about Ryan. What kind of things? Emily. He said her name carefully because what came next was going to hit her in a specific place, and he wanted her to be as steady as possible before it arrived. Before you were with Ryan, before Cincinnati, there was a woman in Dayton, Ohio named Karen Solis. She had a 6-year-old son named Noah. Ryan was with her for about 10 months. Emily was very still. While Ryan was in her apartment, Noah fell from a second-floor window and broke his arm. Emily's arms tightened across her chest. Police investigated, closed it as an accident. Ryan left Karen 4 months after that, cleaned out a joint account on his way out. He paused. In Cincinnati, there was a woman named Deborah Walsh, 8-year-old daughter named Maya. Ryan was with her for about 8 months. Maya fell from playground equipment and fractured her wrist. The ER doctor's initial assessment suggested the injury wasn't consistent with a simple fall. That assessment was amended 3 days later, after Ryan filed a formal complaint with the hospital. Emily had not moved. She was not moving in the way of someone who has gone into a particular kind of shock. Not the dramatic kind, not the visible kind, but the internal kind where the body keeps standing while the mind processes something that does not fit inside any existing framework. 3 children, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Lily is the third. Emily unfolded her arms and pressed one hand flat against the wall beside her. Just for a moment. Just to have something solid. She didn't fall by accident, Emily said. It was not a question. She was not asking him. She was saying it out loud because the mind sometimes needs to hear its own conclusions, spoken in its own voice before they become fully real. That's what I believe, Jack said. But what I believe is not what a court needs, which is why I need you to help me build this carefully. Emily was quiet for a long time. He could see things moving through her face, not one emotion, but several running under the surface. Simultaneously, grief and fury, and something that might have been self-recrimination, the instinct people have when they review what they missed and start to list the things they should have seen. I missed it, she said quietly. Emily, I missed it. She was scared of him, and I thought. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. I thought she was adjusting. I thought she was being difficult because the situation was an adjustment. You were doing the best you could with what you understood. My daughter fell 15 floors. The words landed flat and hard, and she let them land that way, didn't dress them up, didn't soften them for either of them. Jax looked at her, and she's alive, and she's in there coloring dogs, and we are standing in this hallway right now because we have the chance to make sure this doesn't happen again. To her or to anyone else. Emily looked at the wall, then she looked at him. Her eyes were dry. The part of her that was going to cry about this would cry about it later. He could tell in private, in the way people who carry a lot tend to process things alone when nobody needs them to be functional. Right now, she was pushing something down and picking something else up in its place. What do you need from me? She said. Don't let Lily be alone with him. Don't go back to the apartment if he's there. If you need somewhere to go, I'll find it. He paused. And don't tell him any of this. Not yet. He's going to figure out something's wrong. Let him. That's information too. Emily searched his face. You've done this before. Not exactly this, but protecting people, yeah. She nodded once slowly. It was the nod of someone making a decision that they know they're not going to unmake. Okay, she said. What's first? First, I need to find Karen Solis. Karen Solis took 4 days to locate and 2 more days to agree to speak with Frank Dawson, who called her from a private number and introduced himself by his real name with his former badge number attached, which was a calculated risk and a correct one. Former law enforcement carried a different weight than a lawyer or a stranger, and Frank had spent 20 years developing the particular quality of voice that made people understand they were being spoken to by someone who had seen the worst things and was not asking out of curiosity. Karen Solis was 31 years old, living in Columbus, now working nights at a distribution warehouse and days trying to finish a medical billing certification course. She had left Ryan Cole behind in Dayton 3 years ago and had spent considerable effort trying to leave everything about that time behind with him. She agreed to a video call. Jax sat off camera while Frank talked. That was the decision they'd made. Frank's law enforcement history gave the conversation legitimacy, and Jax's presence might make her close down if she ran his name and found what people found when they ran names associated with the club. There was a time for everything. This was Frank's moment. Karen Solis appeared on the screen looking tired in the way of someone who is always tired, a tiredness that has become the baseline rather than the exception. She had dark eyes and a watchful quality that reminded Jax with a jolt he kept off his face of the way Lily watched strangers. I don't talk about that time, she said before Frank had said much of anything. I know, Frank said. I'm asking you to because there's a little girl who survived something she shouldn't have survived, and you might be the person who helps us make sure the man responsible can't do it again. Karen was quiet for a long time. Noah still has trouble with heights, she said finally. Won't go above the 2nd floor of anything. He's 9 years old and he shakes on escalators." Her voice had gone flat in a specific way. "They told me it was an accident. I wanted to believe them." "Did you believe them?" Another long pause. "Ryan told me that Noah had been climbing the furniture." That was true. Noah did climb things. He was that kind of kid. She looked somewhere off camera. "But Noah was afraid of Ryan. I told myself it was adjustment. The same story I told myself about everything." She came back to the camera. "The window screen was on the floor of the room when I got home. Ryan said it had been loose. I asked the building super about it the next day. He told me that screen had been fine at the last inspection 2 months before. The room where Jax was sitting was completely silent." "You didn't put that in your statement," Frank said carefully. "Not accusatory, just accurate. Ryan was there when I gave the statement. He sat right next to me." Her voice didn't change. "He had his hand on my knee the whole time." Jax closed his eyes briefly. "I understand," Frank said. "Karen, are you willing to put any of this in writing?" A very long pause. "If it protects the little girl," she said, "then yes. Yes, I am." Deborah Walsh was harder. Deborah Walsh had moved twice since Cincinnati was currently in Tennessee, and when Tyler finally got a current number through a contact, he didn't fully explain. The first call went to voicemail, the second went to voicemail, and the third was picked up by a woman whose first words were, "If this is anything to do with Ryan Cole, I'm hanging up." "Please don't," Tyler said. He had a voice that was younger and softer than Frank's, and sometimes that was the right instrument. "My name is Tyler Brooks. I'm calling because a 5-year-old girl named Lily Parker survived a fall from the 15th floor of an apartment building in Brookhaven, and the man who was with her before she fell was Ryan Cole." Silence. "She survived," Tyler said again. "She's alive." More silence. Then a sound that Tyler later described when he reported back to Jax as the sound of someone sitting down very suddenly. 15 floors, Deborah Walsh said. "Yes." "Maya fell 8 feet and broke her wrist," Deborah Walsh said, and there was something in her voice that had gone raw and unguarded in the way things go raw when they've been held under pressure for a long time and something releases the valve. 8 feet, and I almost didn't," the doctor said. She stopped, started again. "He told me Maya had been showing off, climbing higher than she was supposed to, that she jumped and misjudged the distance." "Did you believe him?" "I wanted to," she said. The same words Karen Solis had used. The same exact words which told Jack something important about how Ryan Cole operated. He chose women who wanted to believe him, and he gave them just enough to hold on to. "Deborah," Tyler said, "what did Maya tell you?" Another silence, this one longer waited. "She said Ryan had told her she could do it," Deborah Walsh said quietly, "that she was strong enough, that she was brave enough." A pause. "I thought she'd misunderstood." "Kids misunderstand things. They build stories." Her voice cracked at the edge. "I chose to believe she'd misunderstood." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Would you be willing to talk to someone with law enforcement experience?" he asked. "Not to press charges right now, just to talk." Deborah Walsh was quiet for so long that Tyler thought she'd hung up. Then, "If it means he can't do it to any more kids," she said, "then I'll talk." Jax was at the hospital when Tyler called with the result of the Deborah Walsh call, and he stepped into the corridor to take it. And when Tyler finished talking, he stood there for a moment with the phone against his ear and the linoleum under his feet and the sound of a hospital, being a hospital all around him, and he felt the shape of what they were building begin to solidify. 2 women, 2 children, 2 stories that match Lily's in the specific way that stories match when they share the same architect. "Good work," he told Tyler. "What do we do with it?" "Frank knows a prosecutor in the DA's office, someone he trusts. We put it in front of her and we let the system do its part. And if the system moves slow, then we make sure Ryan Cole knows that he's not invisible anymore." Jax looked through the window in the door at Lily, who was still coloring, who would probably always be coloring in his memory of this time. This girl with her crayons and her careful lines and her silver blue eyes that watched everything. Without touching him and without threatening him, we make sure he knows that someone sees him. "That's going to make him move," Tyler said. "I know. He might go after Emily. Try to lock down the story before it comes apart. I know that too, which is why Emily is not going back to that apartment." He paused. "I need you to find me somewhere safe, not connected to the club directly. Something clean." I can do that, Tyler said. By tomorrow. Yeah, by tomorrow. Jax went back into the room. Emily looked up at him from her chair, and he gave her a small nod that meant progress. And she exhaled through her nose and looked at the ceiling briefly in the way she looked at the ceiling when she was holding herself together through pure determination. Lily looked up from her coloring book. Jack's bear, she said. I finished all the dogs. He looked at the page she held up. Every dog, every breed carefully and completely colored. Not a line outside a border, not a space left empty. You did a good job, he said. I know. She set the book down with simple satisfaction and picked up a new one. This one featuring birds, which she showed him with the gravity of someone presenting important documentation. Now I'm going to do birds. He sat in his chair and watched her pick a crayon, and he thought about Ryan Cole waking up in Emily's apartment, moving through the space that belonged to Emily and Lily, running his calculations about how much time he had and whether the variables were still in his favor. I thought about the window screen in Dayton, the amended ER report in Cincinnati, the formal complaint filed through the right channels calmly, correctly, in the way of a man who understood institutions and how to use them. He thought about what it meant to be that kind of patient, that kind of deliberate. Then he thought about something Karen Solis had said near the end of her call with Frank, when Frank had asked whether Ryan Cole had ever shown his hand, ever slipped, ever revealed something underneath the controlled surface. Karen had been quiet for a moment. Then she'd said, once, after Noah's arm healed, Ryan was joking around with him and Noah wouldn't laugh, wouldn't respond to him at all. And Ryan looked at Noah with this expression. She'd paused. Like Noah was a problem he was going to have to solve differently. Jax had heard that secondhand from Frank, but it had stayed with him. A problem he was going to have to solve differently. That was who was living in Emily Parker's apartment. That was who Lily went still for when his name came into the room. He looked at Lily working carefully on a blue jay, her small face bent with concentration. Jax Carter had spent his adult life in the company of men who were not gentle, who had not come from gentle places, who understood that the world contained genuine darkness and that the proper response to darkness was not to look away from it, but to stand in front of it. He had made choices in his life that he didn't regret and some that he did, and he'd learned to live with the weight of both. He was not a man who frightened easily, but sitting in that hospital room watching a 5-year-old color a blue jay with the steady focus of a child who has learned to make the small things feel safe when the large things don't. He felt something that was not quite fear, but lived in its neighborhood. He felt the urgency of it, the need to move fast enough and carefully enough that the man across town, the controlled patient, deliberate man who had left 2 other children behind him and nearly left Lily there too, didn't have time to recalibrate because Ryan Cole was already recalibrating. Jax knew it with the instinct of someone who had spent decades reading people who were deciding what to do next. He was already running numbers, and he had Emily's name on a lease, Emily's phone in his contacts, Emily's trust still partially in his hands, and a story that Ryan Cole had been telling for 3 incidents in a row that had worked every single time. He thought he had time. He thought he still controlled the variables. The most dangerous moment was coming, and it wasn't the moment Ryan Cole got arrested, or the moment his story came apart, or the moment he ran. The most dangerous moment was the moment Ryan Cole figured out that someone was building a wall around him, because that was the moment he'd stop being patient. And Lily was still 3 floors up in a hospital bed, and Emily was still in a vulnerable place, and the work they'd done was real, but it wasn't finished, and Jack sat in his chair in the quiet of that room and thought, we have to move faster than he does. He pulled out his phone and texted Frank 2 words, call her. The her was the prosecutor Frank knew in the DA's office, a woman named Sandra Cho who had built her career on exactly the kind of case where the pattern was visible and the documentation was thin, and the victims were people who'd had reasons not to speak up the first time. Frank called him back 40 seconds later. She's in, Frank said. She wants the files. Give her everything Tyler has. She says it'll take time to build. Tell her we don't have a lot of time. Jax looked at Lily. Tell her the clock is already running. He ended the call. Lily held up a page. How's the blue jay, he asked. She studied it critically. The wing color is wrong, she said. I used too much blue. Real blue jays have some gray. That's a very specific observation. I looked it up in a book at school. She set the page down with mild dissatisfaction and turned to the next bird. I want to do them right. He looked at her. This 5-year-old who wanted to do things right, who colored inside the lines and researched the accurate colors of birds, and watched men she didn't know with careful silver blue eyes and said without any drama, without any performance that Ryan had told her she was brave enough to fly. Lily, he said, she looked up. You know you can tell me things, right? Things that are on your mind, things that feel heavy. She considered this with the thoughtfulness she brought to most things. Like what kind of things? Like anything. Things that happened, things that scared you. He kept his voice easy, kept the weight out of it. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you ever want to, I'm here. Lily looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at her coloring book. I know, she said simply. She picked up a gray crayon. Outside the hospital room, Brookhaven was moving through another ordinary afternoon, people driving and working and living their lives inside the assumption that danger wears a face you can recognize. Jax had spent enough time on the other side of that assumption to know how wrong it usually was. Ryan Cole wore a perfectly ordinary face. He was counting on everyone around Emily Parker to go on believing it. Jax texted Tyler next. Find me that address. Today. I was done waiting for the problem to move toward them. He was going to move first. Tyler found the address in 4 hours. It was a rental unit in a 2-story building on Mercer Street, 12 blocks from the hospital, owned by a woman named Gloria Hennessy, who had been renting to a rotating cast of young nurses and medical students for 20 years, and who, when Tyler explained the situation in terms that were honest without being alarming, said, honey, I have a daughter. Tell the woman and her little girl to come whenever they're ready. Jax called Emily at 6 that evening. I have a place, he said. Safe, clean, no connection to Ryan. I need you to pack what you need for you and Lily essentials, only 1 bag each, and I need you to do it when Ryan isn't home. Emily was quiet for a moment. He could hear her breathing. He goes to the gym Thursday mornings, she said. 6 to 8. That's tomorrow. Yes. Can you do it tomorrow? Another pause. Shorter this time. Yes, she said. I'll have Marcus outside the building at 5:45. He'll wait until you're ready, and he'll drive you to the new place. You don't have to talk to Ryan before you go. You don't have to explain anything. He'll know something's wrong when he gets back. He already knows something's wrong, Jax said. That's why we're moving. Emily absorbed that. Okay, she said. Okay, what do I tell Lily? I thought about it for a moment. Tell her you're going somewhere safe. She'll understand safe. Marcus Webb was parked outside Emily's building at that 5:43 Thursday morning, engine off, coffee in hand, saying nothing to nobody, which was Marcus's natural state, and one of the reasons Jax had asked him specifically. Marcus was not a man who filled silence with noise. He could sit outside a building at 5 in the morning for 2 hours and make it look like he had nowhere better to be, which was exactly what the situation required. Emily came out at 7:18 with a duffel bag and a backpack in an expression that Marcus described afterward as the face of a woman who has made a decision and is not changing her mind about it. She put the bags in the back of his truck without being asked and got in the passenger seat and said, "Thank you for doing this." Marcus handed her the other coffee cup from the holder. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We haven't left the block." She looked at him, then she almost smiled. "That's honest at least." "I try," Marcus said and pulled away from the curb. Jax met them at the Mercer Street apartment. Gloria Hennessy was already there, had left a box of groceries on the counter and fresh towels in the bathroom, and had apparently also left a small stuffed bear on the bed in the room Emily had pointed to as Lily's space, which none of them had asked her to do, and which made Emily press her hand over her mouth for a moment when she saw it. She said she had extras, Marcus said, like this required explanation. Emily picked up the bear and held it against her chest for a moment. Then she set it carefully on the pillow and turned around, and her face was back to functional. "Thank you," she said to Jax. "Both of you." "Lily's being discharged tomorrow," Jax said. "I'll be there for that." "Ryan will expect to be there too." "I know. Does he know the discharge is tomorrow?" "I haven't told him." "Keep it that way." Emily nodded. She looked around the room with its bare walls and its neutral furniture and the box of groceries on the counter, and something in her face was working through a calculation. The specific calculation of a woman measuring what she's left against what she might still have and trying to decide whether the math makes sense. "This is real," she said quietly. It was not directed at anyone. She was saying it to herself. "Yeah," Jack said, "it is." Ryan Cole called Emily at 8:47 Thursday morning, which was 29 minutes after he'd returned from the gym, to find the apartment missing most of Lily's things and a significant portion of Emily's. Jax knew the timeline because Emily texted him when the call came in, and he texted back a single word. Answer, she answered. She told Ryan she needed some space while Lily recovered, that staying somewhere quieter would be better for the healing process, that she'd be in touch. She kept her voice even and gave him nothing that sounded like accusation, nothing that sounded like fear, nothing that sounded like the conversation happening 3 feet away from his right ear. Ryan Cole was quiet for almost 15 seconds after she finished speaking. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "With a friend," Emily said. "I'll let you know when things settle." Emily, his voice had shifted. Not loud, not threatening, something more controlled than that and therefore more unsettling. "I've been worried about you, both of you. I think it would be better if we talked in person." "I'll call you soon," Emily said and ended the call. She sat down on the edge of the bed and let out a long breath that carried about 6 days of held tension in it. Then she picked up her phone again and texted Jax. He asked where I was. I didn't tell him. Jax read it in the parking lot of the hospital where he'd come to check discharge paperwork. "Good. Don't call back for at least 48 hours. Let him wait." He pocketed the phone and went inside. Sandra Cho had been an assistant district attorney for 11 years, and before that she'd been a public defender for 4, which meant she'd spent a decade and a half on both sides of the same table, and had developed a particular intolerance for cases where the pattern was obvious and the documentation was assembled wrong. She was 46 years old, drove a 10-year-old Civic, and had the reputation in the DA's office of being the person you sent pattern cases to because she had the patience to build them correctly and the stubbornness to see them through. Frank had known her since her public defender days, when she'd represented a club member on a charge that turned out to be based on bad information, and she'd fought that case hard and clean and won it, and Frank had respected that enough to remember her name when it mattered. She met them in a coffee shop on Addison Street, Frank and Jax, no one else public enough to be neutral, quiet enough to talk. She looked at Jax across the table with the direct appraisal of someone who had spent 11 years reading people in courtrooms and had no patience for the version of themselves they tried to present. "You're the one who caught her," she said. "Yeah." "Your shoulder healed." "Working on it." She nodded once, setting that aside. "Walk me through what you have, all of it. Don't editorialize, just fact sources and what each one proves or fails to prove." Frank laid it out. Tyler's research, Karen Solis's statement, Deborah Walsh's agreement to speak the ER doctor's original finding, and its amendment, the window screen in Dayton, the formal complaint Ryan had filed against the Cincinnati hospital. He spoke for 11 minutes without interruption, which was longer than most people got from Sandra Cho, without interruption, which told Jax that she was genuinely listening. When Frank finished, she was quiet for a moment. 3 incidents, she said. 3 different jurisdictions. No convictions, no charges, filed 1 investigation that was essentially shut down by a formal complaint. She looked at her coffee cup. "The pattern is clear. The documentation is thin." "We know that," Frank said. "Lily's testimony is going to be central," Sandra said. "A 5-year-old's account of what was said to her on a balcony. Defense will go after her credibility, her age, her understanding of what was said." She paused. "But if we have Karen Solis in writing, and Deborah Walsh willing to testify about what Maya told her about Ryan telling Maya she was strong enough, that's pattern evidence. That's a jury seeing the same behavior across 3 children in 3 cities over 7 years. "Can you use it?" Jax asked. Sandra looked at him. "I can build with it. It's going to take time." "How much time?" "Months at minimum." She held up a hand before he could respond. "I know that's not what you want to hear. But if I move too fast and the case is thin, he walks, and once he walks, he's gone, new city, new woman, and we never find the 4th child." She looked at both of them steadily. "The goal is not to arrest him. The goal is to convict him." The distinction landed in the way. Important distinctions land quietly but with weight. "What do we do in the meantime?" Frank asked. "Keep Emily and Lily away from him. If he tries to contact them in ways that feel threatening or coercive, document everything. Save text, save voicemails, note dates and times. If he escalates, we have additional grounds." She picked up her pen and wrote something on the legal pad she'd brought. I'm going to reach out to the detectives who handled the Dayton and Cincinnati cases and open an interjurisdictional conversation. That needs to happen through official channels. She looked at Jax. And I need you to not do anything that gives him grounds to claim harassment or intimidation. Whatever your instinct is right now, you control it. Jax looked at her evenly. My instinct is to build this right, he said. That's why I'm at this table instead of somewhere else. Sandra Cho studied him for a moment. Then she nodded. Good, she said. Then we're going to be okay. Lily came to Mercer Street, which would become home, which was already beginning to become home, in the way that places become home when they feel safe on a Friday afternoon in a car that Jax drove with his right arm, mostly working in, and his ribs down to a dull ache that he'd learned to carry as background noise. She walked in holding her coloring books under one arm and the stuffed bear that Gloria Hennessy had left on her pillow under the other, and she looked around the apartment with the assessment of a child who is measuring a new space for its essential properties. Is this ours? She asked. For now, Emily said. Lily looked at the bear in her arm. Gloria Bear can stay here too, she said seriously, having apparently named the bear while still at the hospital, which no one had known about until this moment. Absolutely, Jack said. She went into the room that was hers and put Gloria Bear on the pillow and the coloring books on the desk, and came back out with the specific, satisfied expression of someone who has established the key coordinates of a new location. It's good, she announced. Emily looked at Jax over Lily's head. Her eyes were doing something complicated that her face was trying not to show. Yeah, Jack said. It is. Ryan Cole sent Emily 4 texts on Friday, then 2 on Saturday. Then on Sunday he sent one that was different from the others, shorter, quieter, and in the particular register of someone who has stopped asking and started stating. I think you've been talking to someone who doesn't have your best interests in mind. I'd like the chance to explain some things before you make a decision you can't take back. I love you and Lily. Please don't let someone else make this choice for you. Emily forwarded it to Jax without comment. He read it twice. Then he forwarded it to Sandra Cho. He's pivoting. He texted Frank. Watch for the next move. The next move came on Monday. Sim. Marcus called at 8:15 Monday morning with a voice that had gone to the flat register. Jax, you need to know something. Talk. Ryan Cole was outside the hospital last night. About 9 p.m., he talked to a nurse at the main desk, asked about Lily's discharge date, her condition, whether she had had any visitors named Jackson Carter. Jax was standing in the kitchen of his own place and he stopped moving entirely. She tell him anything. Discharge date was already public from when he was listed as a contact. She wouldn't have given him more than that, but he knows she's already gone. He's tracking movement, Jax said. He's been patient and now he's checking the perimeter. He thought for a moment. Did you get a plate? Yeah, Tyler's running it now. Tell Tyler I want to know every place that car has been in the last 2 weeks. He ended the call and stood in the kitchen for a moment, thinking about Sandra Cho's timeline, months at minimum, in the distance between that timeline and the one Ryan Cole appeared to be running. A man who had stayed invisible for 3 incidents across 7 years did not go to hospital front desks and ask about a child by name unless he was calculating that the situation required a different approach. He decided the variables had changed, which meant he decided he needed to change his approach before someone else changed it for him. Jax called Frank. He's moving, Jax said. We need to accelerate what we can accelerate. Sandra needs time, Frank said. I know, we give her the time we can, but Ryan is running his own clock and we need to make sure he understands that showing his face at that hospital is the kind of mistake that gets noticed. He paused. Not a threat, a fact. I want him to understand someone's watching. Frank was quiet for a moment. You want to let him see us? I want him to understand that the calculation he's been making, that he's invisible, that nobody's connected the dots is wrong, without saying a word to him, without giving him anything he can file a complaint about. Jax thought about Ryan's texts, about the formal complaint filed against the Cincinnati hospital, about every methodical pressure point he'd identified and leveraged. He's used to being the only person playing the long game. I want him to figure out he's not. How? Karen Solis is willing to put her account in writing. What happens when a notarized statement from Dayton, Ohio shows up at his workplace HR department with a copy to the Dayton PD, with a copy to Sandra Cho? Jax paused. Nothing illegal, all public documents, All accurate, just visible, just enough that he has to stop and look at the size of what's being built around him. Frank was quiet for a long moment. That's going to shake him, Frank said. Good. Scared men make mistakes. That's the idea, another pause. It might also make him dangerous, Frank said. You thought about that? Every hour of every day since Lily told me what he said on that balcony, Jack said, which is why Emily and Lily are not in that apartment and why Marcus is sitting on their block right now. Frank exhaled. I'll call Karen's attorney. The notarized statement arrived at Ryan Cole's employer, a property management company in Brookhaven where he'd been working for 3 years as a leasing agent, on a Tuesday morning. Karen Soles had written it herself, reviewed it with a lawyer, and signed it in front of a notary in Columbus on the previous Friday. It described in plain, direct language the events of the Sunday afternoon in Dayton when Noah Salas fell from a second-floor window while in Ryan Cole's care. It described the window screen on the floor. It described the building super's assessment of the screen's prior condition. It described the quality of silence that Ryan had maintained while Karen gave her police statement with his hand on her knee. It was 3 pages long. It was factual. It contained no accusations of criminal conduct, only a sequential account of events as Karen Solis had experienced them. Sandra Cho had reviewed it before it was sent and had confirmed it was within legal bounds. A copy went to the Dayton Police Department. A copy went to Sandra Cho's office. A copy went to the property management company's Human Resources Department. Ryan Cole found out about it at 11:15 Tuesday morning when his manager called him into the office and closed the door. Tyler, who had a contact at the property management company, reported back to Jax by noon. He kept it together in the meeting, Tyler said. Told them it was a misunderstanding, that he had documentation that would clear everything up, that the woman had a history of making false claims. He paused. They put him on administrative leave while they look into it. Jax listened. He left the building at 11:45, Tyler continued. He sat in his car for 22 minutes. Then he drove to a bar on Henderson and had 2 drinks by himself. Another pause. Then he drove to Mercer Street. That air in the room changed. He drove to Mercer Street, Jax repeated. Parked across the street, sat there for about 15 minutes, then drove away. Jax's jaw tightened. Tyler didn't need to explain what it meant. Ryan Cole had found the address where Emily and Lily were staying, which meant the operational security had a gap somewhere which they would find and close, but that was the secondary problem. The primary problem was that Ryan Cole had driven to where Lily was living and sat outside for 15 minutes. Marcus on the block, Jax asked. Was during the morning. I'm calling him now. Tell him he stays on the block until further notice. Around the clock we rotate. Not optional. Jax stood up. And Tyler, how did he find the address? Tyler was quiet for a moment. Emily's credit card. She stopped at a gas station 4 blocks from Mercer on Thursday afternoon. He must have still had access to a shared account. Close it. I'll call her now. Jax was already moving toward the door. He called Sandra Cho on the way to his bike. He went to their address, he said when she picked up. He sat outside for 15 minutes. Sandra Cho was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Did he approach the building? No. Did he contact Emily or Lily? Not that we know of. Then I can't get a restraining order today, but I can have paperwork ready to file the moment he makes contact or approaches the building again. Her voice had changed. It had the focused quality of someone shifting into a different gear. Jax, I need you to listen to me carefully. Do not confront him. Do not send anyone to confront him. If he feels cornered and he's escalating, the worst thing we can do is give him a reason to act. I know. I mean it. Sandra, I know. He got on the bike. I'm going to the apartment, just to check. You're not going to do anything stupid. Not my plan, she paused. Your plan better be a good one. My plan is to sit outside a building and make sure a child is safe, he said. I'm comfortable with that plan. He ended the call and started the bike. He sat outside Mercer Street for 3 hours that afternoon, parked where he could see the entrance and the street in both directions. His arm mostly okay and his ribs telling him he'd been sitting too long, but not so urgently that he moved. Marcus had rotated off at noon and the next brother, Danny Reyes, wasn't due until 4, so Jack sat and watched the block and thought. I thought about the 15 minutes Ryan had sat across the street. What did a man do in 15 minutes of sitting outside a building where the woman he'd been controlling and the child he'd nearly killed were now living under someone else's protection. Did he count exits? Did he measure the distance? Did he sit there running the updated version of his calculation, the one where his job was gone, his story was circulating, his control of Emily had slipped, and the variables had stopped behaving the way they were supposed to? The most dangerous thing about a controlled man losing control was that the control didn't disappear all at once. It unraveled unevenly. He'd be controlled in one area and not in another. He'd make a calculated move and then a reckless one. He'd be patient until he wasn't, and the switch between the two would be fast. Jax had seen that transition before, in very different contexts with very different people, but the shape of it was the same. "I'm texted Emily, I'm outside, everything okay in there?" Her reply came in 30 seconds. "Yes, Lily's doing a puzzle, we're okay." He looked at the building. Then he texted back, "Change your bank account login today. Change your email password. Change anything he might have had access to." 3 dots. "Then Tyler already called me about the credit card. I'm doing it now." He put the phone away. At 4:15, Ryan Cole called Emily. She texted Jax immediately, and he called her back, and she put him on speaker so he could hear both sides. And Ryan's voice came through the phone in the particular register Jax had been waiting for, still controlled at the surface, but with something underneath it that had changed. A pressure, a friction, like the surface of a lake when the wind changes direction and the water hasn't decided yet how to respond. "I know you're at Mercer Street," Ryan said. Emily didn't react. She'd been coached for this. She kept her breathing even. "I'm staying with a friend," she said. Same words as before. "Emily," his voice sharpened by about 10%. "I've been very patient. I've respected your need for space. But you need to understand that what's happening right now is not fair to me. Someone is spreading false information about me, and it's affecting my job, and you need to help me address that." "I don't know anything about that," Emily said. "A woman I knew years ago, a woman who has a documented history of instability, has sent some kind of statement to my employer. I need to know if you've been in contact with her." Emily looked at Jax's name on the phone screen. Her jaw was steady. "I haven't been in contact with anyone." "Someone has," Ryan said. The pressure was climbing, still controlled, but climbing the way water climbs in a sealed container when you apply heat. "And whoever it is, whoever this biker has connected you with, they don't care about you and Lily. They care about something else. I need you to think very carefully about whose version of events you're choosing to believe." "I'm not choosing anything right now," Emily said. "I need more time." "Time." The word landed flat. "Emily, I love Lily. You know that. I would never do anything to hurt her. What happened was an accident, and I have never stopped being devastated by it. But someone is using that accident to destroy my life, and I need—" "Ryan," Emily said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "I need more time." A silence. "Okay," he said. And that was all. Just okay, calm again, back behind the surface. "I'll wait." He ended the call. Emily sat down heavily and pressed her hands against her knees and breathed. "You did great," Jax said through the phone. "He knows where we are," she said. Not panicked. Factual. "I know, I'm outside right now, and Danny takes over at 4. You're not alone." She was quiet for a moment. "He said it was an accident," she said. He sounded for a second, he almost sounded like he believed it. "He's been telling that story for 7 years, Jax said. He believes the version he needs to believe." Another pause. "What does he do next?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Suck. What Ryan Cole did next was unexpected, and it was smart, and it was the kind of move that reminded Jax of the thing Frank had said early on: "This man knows exactly what he's doing." On Wednesday morning, Ryan Cole walked into the Brookhaven Police Department and filed a report. He reported that he was the victim of a harassment campaign. He named Jackson Carter. He named the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. He stated that he had been surveilled, that false documents had been sent to his employer, and that he was experiencing fear for his safety. Yet he was calm, coherent, and had printed documentation screenshots of the club's social media presence, public news articles about motorcycle clubs and criminal activity in general, and a typed timeline of what he described as a coordinated effort to intimidate and destroy him. He filed it correctly, through the right channels, the way he did everything. Frank heard about it from his contact at Brookhaven PD by noon. He called Jax and his voice had the flat register, and this time it was flatter than usual. He filed first, Frank said. Jax processed that for a moment. The shape of it, the intelligence of it. Ryan Cole, faced with a wall being built around him, had done the one thing that could complicate everything. He'd walked into a police station and made himself the victim before the case against him was ready to make him the perpetrator. Sandra needs to know, Jack said. I called her first. She's not panicking, but she is focused. Meaning, she said, and I'm quoting, he just made a serious miscalculation. Jax waited. By filing that report, he put himself on record. He named you, he named the club. He created a documented interaction with law enforcement that she can use to show that he was aware of the investigation, that he understood the evidence against him was accumulating, and that his response was to preemptively discredit rather than to cooperate or address the underlying facts. Frank paused. She said innocent men who've been falsely accused don't spend their first call at the station naming motorcycle clubs. They ask about the charges. Jax thought about that. He tipped his hand, he said. She thinks so. She's moving the timeline up. Frank paused. She's calling the Dayton detective today, and she's reaching out to Maya's mother directly. Jax stood very still for a moment in the morning air, thinking about Ryan Cole in a police station with his typed timeline and his printed documentation controlled, incoherent, and patient. The way he'd been patient for 7 years and how that patience had just produced the one document that Sandra Cho needed to show a jury that the man being accused of attempting to harm children had responded to that accusation not with shock or grief or denial, but with a prepared counter-narrative. He'd been ready. He'd known this day was coming, and he prepared for it the same way he prepared for everything, carefully through channels, in ways that looked like innocence. But this time somebody had been watching him prepare. Frank, Jack said, yeah. Tell Sandra we need to move on the restraining order. Today. He knows the address. He sat outside it. He's filing reports. The escalation is real, and I don't want to be right about what comes next. Frank said nothing for a moment. You think he'd actually... I think he's a man who has nearly killed 3 children and stayed invisible every single time, Jack said. I think he's calculated, and I think he's cornered, and I think cornered and calculated is the worst possible combination. He paused. So yes, I want the restraining order today. I'll tell her. He ended the call. He looked at the building on Mercer Street. Somewhere on the 2nd floor, a 5-year-old girl was doing a puzzle or coloring birds or having a conversation with a stuffed bear, and her mother was watching her and holding everything together one breath at a time. And across Brookhaven, Ryan Cole was deciding what came next. Jack started his bike. He was going to make sure that whatever came next, he was already in position when it arrived. Sandra Cho filed the restraining order paperwork at 2:17 Wednesday afternoon, and by 4 o'clock, a judge had signed it. Ryan Cole was served at 5:41 at the apartment he'd been sharing with Emily. Now Emily's apartment in name only, since she'd been gone for 5 days by a process server who found him home, which meant he hadn't gone anywhere after the police station, which meant he'd been sitting in that apartment running his calculations and waiting. Frank got the confirmation text from Sandra at 6:04. He forwarded it to Jax with no comment. Jax read it outside the Mercer Street building where Danny Reyes had just handed the evening watch back to him, and he felt something release in his chest. Not relief exactly, because relief implied the danger was over, and it wasn't, but a kind of structural solidity, the feeling of a load-bearing wall going up. Ryan Cole now had a legal document telling him he could not come within 300 feet of Emily Parker or Lily Parker. Every contact attempt was now documented. Every violation was now a separate criminal act. He'd lost the ability to operate quietly. That was the point. I was still singing on his bike outside Mercer Street at 7:15 when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer it. Then something, the particular habit of attention he'd built over decades, made him pick up. Is this Jackson Carter? A woman's voice. Controlled but carrying something underneath it that control was working hard to contain. Who's asking? My name is Dr. Linda Marsh. I was the emergency room physician at Cincinnati General who examined Maya Walsh 4 years ago. A pause. Deborah Walsh gave me your contact information. She told me what's happening in Brookhaven. Another pause longer. I've been waiting for someone to call up that case for 4 years. Jax was very still on the bike. Dr. Marsh, he said carefully, tell me what you want to tell me. I amended my assessment, she said. You already know that. What you don't know what isn't in any file is why I amended it. He waited. 3 days after I filed my original finding, I received a phone call from a man who identified himself as a representative of the hospital's legal department. He told me that my assessment had created a significant liability for the institution, that the family had not consented to an examination framed as a potential abuse case, and that if I maintained my original language, I would be opening both myself and the hospital to a lawsuit. Her voice was steady in the way that voices go steady when they've rehearsed something many times before saying it out loud. He told me the family, Ryan Cole specifically, had already retained an attorney. Was that true? Jax asked. I don't know. I believed it at the time because I was 29. I'd been a doctor for 4 months, and the person calling me sounded like he knew exactly what he was talking about. She paused. The call lasted 11 minutes. By the end of it, I had agreed to amend my language. I signed the amended report the next morning, and I have not slept a full night since. The street was quiet around Jax. He could hear his own breathing and the distant sound of traffic 3 blocks over, and nothing else. Was there actually a legal department representative who made that call? He asked. I requested the call logs 2 years later after I'd moved hospitals and had enough distance to look at it clearly. Her voice tightened. There was no such call in the hospital's outbound call records for that date. The extension the man had called from was not a hospital extension. She stopped. Someone called me from an outside line pretending to be from the hospital's legal department and pressured a 29-year-old resident into amending the medical record of a potentially abused child. Jax closed his eyes briefly. Dr. Marsh, he said, are you willing to put this in writing, all of it, the original call, the request for logs, what you found? I called Deborah Walsh last night, she said. She told me a 5-year-old girl fell 15 floors and survived. She told me the man responsible is in Brookhaven right now. Her voice cracked at the edge, just slightly, and then it was steady again. I have been a doctor for 4 years since that night, and I have thought about Maya Walsh every single time I have examined a child. Yes, Mr. Carter, I'll put it in writing. I'll put it on a witness stand if that's what it takes. He ended the call and sat for a moment with the phone in his hand and the weight of what he'd just heard settling into the structure of everything else they'd built. Ryan Cole had not just pressured a domestic partner into silence. He had impersonated a hospital legal representative to coerce a physician into altering a medical record. That was not a man running on instinct and manipulation. That was a man who was willing to commit separate crimes to protect his central crime. That was a man who had a plan for every contingency. He called Frank. Get Sandra on the phone right now, he said. I have something that changes the shape of this. That's him. Sandra Cho listened to the summary of the Dr. Marsh call without interrupting, and when Jax finished, she was quiet for about 4 seconds, which was Jax had learned in their short acquaintance Sandra Cho's version of a long pause. Impersonating a hospital official to coerce amendment of a medical record, she said, that's fraud, that's potentially obstruction, depending on whether the original assessment was part of an official investigation. She paused. That also means the amended record is not legally valid, and the original assessment that Maya's injury was inconsistent with a simple fall is the operative document. Can you use it? I can do more than use it. If Dr. Marsh is willing to testify, she becomes our through line. She connects Cincinnati to Brookhaven. She explains to a jury exactly what this man does when someone threatens to expose him. He doesn't run. He doesn't panic. He engineers a solution through channels that look legitimate until you look closely. Sandra's voice had an edge in it that Jax hadn't heard before, not anger exactly, but a focused intensity that came from a lawyer who has just found the piece that ties the whole structure together. Jax, this is the case. This is what we needed. How long? I can move for an arrest warrant within 2 weeks if Dr. Marsh's written statement is as strong as what you just described. I need Karen Solis's notarized account as Exhibit, Dr. Marsh's statement as Exhibit B, and Deborah Walsh's testimony about what Maya told her as the pattern evidence. She paused. I also need Lily. The word sat between them. She's 5, Jack said. I know. I'm not going to put her on a stand right now, but I need a child psychologist to interview her, someone, court-certified, someone whose methodology is bulletproof, and I need that interview documented. What she said to you on that balcony is hearsay in your mouth. In a certified evaluation, it's admissible. She paused. Can Emily consent to that? Emily will do whatever protects her daughter, Jack said. That's not a question. Then set it up. I'll give you a name, Dr. Patricia Osei. She does pediatric forensic assessments for the DA's office. She's done this 50 times. Lily will be safe with her. I'll talk to Emily tonight. Emily's response to the plan, when Jax laid it out at the kitchen table in the Mercer Street apartment while Lily slept in the next room, was immediate and without hesitation. Tell me when and where, she said. She'd been holding a mug of tea that she'd stopped drinking when he started talking, and she set it down on the table now and looked at him with the expression she'd been developing over the past 2 weeks. Not the expression of someone overwhelmed by what was happening to her, but the expression of someone who has decided to be a participant in her own story rather than a subject of it. There's something else, Jack said. Emily waited. Dr. Marsh's state demanded if Sandra moves on an arrest warrant within 2 weeks, Ryan is going to know the walls are closing. He's already been served with the restraining order. He already knows the Dayton statement went to his employer. He looked at her steadily. The question is what he does when he realizes the exit is closing. Emily was quiet for a moment. You think he'll run? Or he'll try to do something that neutralizes the problem before it becomes permanent. He said it plainly because Emily deserved plain. A man like Ryan has always had an exit. Every time in every city, he's been able to reframe the story or relocate or find a new position. This is the first time all 3 exits are being closed at once. He paused. I don't know which way he breaks, but I need you to be ready for either. Emily looked at her tea. Then she looked at the closed door to Lily's room. Then she looked back at Jax. When Noah fell, she said slowly, Karen Solis stayed. When Maya got hurt, Deborah Walsh stayed. She paused. They stayed and they adjusted their stories because they believed it was an accident, because he gave them a version of events that fit inside the category of accident. Yes. He can't do that with Lily, Emily said. Lily told you what happened, and she told you in a way that a 5-year-old tells you things without understanding that what she was saying was. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. He knows she told you, doesn't he? Jax looked at her. He may not know the specifics, but he knows you left. He knows you're not coming back. He knows something shifted. He paused. He knows Lily survived. The last sentence moved through the room the way certain sentences do, quietly but altering everything they touch. Lily surviving is the thing that breaks his pattern, Emily said. Every other time the children were hurt enough to be credible victims, but not coherent enough to tell a story. Her voice had gone very quiet. Lily is 5 and she can tell a story. Yes, Emily sat with that for a long time. He chose us wrong, she said finally. He underestimated you, Jack said, and he underestimated Lily. Something moved through Emily's face that wasn't quite a smile but lived adjacent to one. She's been coloring inside the lines since she was 3, she said. She's the most precise person I've ever met. I know, Jack said. I've watched her work. Dr. Patricia Osei had an office in a building 2 miles from the courthouse that was designed with the specific intention of making children feel that it was not an official place. There were bookshelves with picture books at child height and a basket of art supplies on a low table and a corner with floor cushions and a collection of small, stuffed animals arranged with the casual intentionality of a set designer who understood that children needed to feel like they discovered the space rather than been brought to it. Lily looked at all of this for about 30 seconds, then selected a stuffed dog from the corner, brought it to the low table, and began examining the art supplies with professional interest. Dr. Osei, a calm, unhurried woman in her late 40s with natural hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck, sat in a chair that was sized for adults but positioned at a low enough angle that she and Lily could make eye contact without Lily having to look up. She introduced herself as Patricia and asked Lily what the dog's name was. I haven't decided yet, Lily said, examining a purple marker. Names are important. You should take time with them. That's very wise, Dr. Osei said. Jack's bear named me Lily, Lily said, which was not accurate but was clearly how she'd organized the information in her mind, and Dr. Osei noted it and didn't correct it. Emily and Jax waited in the corridor. The session was 55 minutes. Jax knew the time exactly because he was aware of every minute of it, sitting on a hard plastic chair, with his arms on his knees and his eyes on the closed door. Emily sat beside him and drank a coffee that she'd gotten from a machine down the hall, and occasionally checked her phone and said nothing, which Jax appreciated in the way he'd come to appreciate Emily's understanding of when silence was the right language. At the 40-minute mark, Emily said, "She's going to be okay in there." "I know," Jax said. "I'm not saying it for you. I'm saying it for me." "I know that too." At 55 minutes, the door opened and Lily came out with the stuffed dog under her arm and a purple drawing in her other hand that she held up for Jax's inspection. "It's a bear," she said. He looked at it. It was recognizably bear-shaped, rendered in purple, with what appeared to be a motorcycle in the lower right corner. "Is that me, Jax Bear on a motorcycle?" she confirmed. "Dr. Patricia let me keep the marker." He looked at Dr. Osei, who was standing in the doorway of her office, and whose expression told him most of what he needed to know, that the session had gone the way it needed to go, that Lily had said the things she needed to say in the way that would matter, and that the child coming out the door with a purple drawing was going to be okay in a way that had nothing to do with the legal case and everything to do with something sturdier inside her. "Thank you," Jack said. "She's a remarkable little person," Dr. Osei said. She looked at Emily. "I'll have my full report to Sandra Cho's office by Friday. We can talk about next steps then." She looked at Lily. "Goodbye, Lily. Take good care of that dog." "His name is Chester," Lily said. She'd apparently decided during the walk from the office to the door. "Because he looks serious." Dr. Osei smiled. "Chester is a good name." "I know," Lily said. "I took my time with it." Sandra Cho called Jax at 8:15 Friday morning, the morning Dr. Osei's report arrived in her office. "I'm going to the judge today," she said. "I have enough." Jax stopped what he was doing. "Walk me through it." Karen Solis's notarized account window screen, police statement, joint account, Dr. Linda Marsh's written statement, the fraudulent call, the amended record, the original assessment reinstated by evidence. Deborah Walsh's testimony about what Maya told her, the language about being strong enough, being brave enough, the parallel to what Lily told you. And Dr. Osei's evaluation of Lily, certified methodology, bulletproof, admissible. Sandra paused. 4 independent lines of evidence converging on one person. 3 children in 3 cities. 7 years, and a documented pattern of behavior designed to keep him invisible. What charge? Felony child endangerment for Brookhaven. Lily's case, our jurisdiction. Fraud charges related to the Cincinnati hospital record. And I'm in contact with the Dayton DA's office. They are reopening Noah Solis's case as of yesterday morning. The scope of it settled over Jack slowly and completely, the way the full size of something only becomes clear when you see all its dimensions at once. "He's going to run," Jack said. "He might try, which is why I'm going to the judge this morning and not Monday." "Do you have enough for the judge to move fast?" "I have enough for the judge to move today," Sandra said, and her voice had in it the particular quality of a woman who has done this many times and knows when she's standing on solid ground. "Jax, I need you to stay away from him. When the warrant is issued, Brookhaven PD handles the arrest. This has to go through the system clean." "I understand that." "I know you understand it. I'm saying it anyway." He almost smiled. "You say it every time. Because every time there's a moment when understanding it and doing it might not match up," she said. "This is that moment. Can I count on you?" "Yeah," he said. "You can count on me." JM. The arrest warrant was issued at 2:44 Friday afternoon. Jax knew because Sandra texted him the moment it was signed. 2 words, "It's done." Brookhaven PD sent 2 detectives and a patrol car to Ryan Cole's apartment at 3:15. They knocked. Ryan Cole answered the door in the particular way of someone who has been waiting, dressed calm, nothing visible in his face that said, surprise, because Ryan Cole had apparently anticipated this too, had made his calculation and decided that this was the version of events where he cooperated quietly and let his attorney handle the next phase. I was wrong about that, but not in a way he'd understand until much later. He was handcuffed at 3:22 and placed in the back of the patrol car at 3:28, and the neighbors who'd seen him come and go for months, the couple across the hall who thought he seemed normal, the building manager who liked him because he always paid on time stood in their doorways and watched the controlled, pleasant patient man be put in a car, and none of them could quite reconcile what they were seeing with the person they thought they knew. That was always how it went with men like Ryan Cole. Frank called Jax while it was happening because Frank had a contact at Brookhaven PD who was watching the arrest, and Frank's voice when he called was not celebratory. It was the voice of a man who has seen enough of the world to know that an arrest is a step, not an ending. He's in custody, Frank said. Okay, Jack said. He didn't resist, didn't say anything, just asked to call his attorney. That's who he is, Jack said. Right up to the end, he's who he is. Frank was quiet for a moment. You going to tell Emily? Yeah. How do you think she'll take it? Jax thought about Emily Parker, the hurried ponytail, the coffee stain on her work shirt, the way she'd sat in a hospital corridor and said, my daughter fell 15 floors with the flat precision of someone forcing herself to see something clearly. He thought about the woman she'd been when he first met her and the woman she was now 10 days later, sitting in a borrowed apartment on Mercer Street, making decisions with the directness of someone who had decided that this time she was going to face the thing rather than accommodate it. I think she's ready, he said. He drove to Mercer Street. Emily was in the kitchen when he knocked, and she opened the door and read his face before he said anything. And he watched the progression move through her, the confirmation, the impact, the processing, all of it in about 3 seconds. And then she put her hand on the door frame and held it there for a moment and looked at the floor. They arrested him, she said. Yes. She nodded slowly. Then she straightened up and looked at him directly. Lily's in the other room. I know. We don't have to tell her everything. Just that things are getting better. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Is that true? Yes, he said. That's true. She nodded again. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't let them go further than that. She turned around and went to the doorway of Lily's room and knocked lightly on the half-open door. Hey, Lil. Lily looked up from the floor where she was sitting with Chester the dog and a coloring book, a page of birds half finished in front of her. What? I have some good news, Emily said. Her voice was steady. Some things are going to be better now, for both of us. Lily considered this. Because of Jack's bear. Emily looked over her shoulder at Jax in the doorway. Yeah, she said, partly because of Jack's bear. Lily accepted this with the nodding gravity of someone receiving a briefing. Good, she said. Chester thinks it's good too. She looked at the dog. Don't you, Chester? She made the dog's head move in a nodding motion, then looked back at her birds. Emily turned back to the hallway and leaned her back against the wall beside the door and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and Jack stood in the corridor and let her have that moment without filling it. When she looked back at him, her jaw was set and her eyes were clear. What happens now, she said. Now the system does its part, Jack said. Sandra builds the case. Karen Solis and Dr. Marsh and Deborah Walsh give their statements. Dr. Osei's evaluation goes in evidence. He paused. It'll take time. There'll be hearings and motions, and Ryan's attorney will do what defense attorneys do. But the case is solid, and Sandra doesn't lose cases she's confident in. And in the meantime, you and Lily are safe. That's not going to change. Emily looked at him steadily. You know what I keep thinking about? She said, tell me. The neighbor across the hall from us, Mrs. Garrett, she's 72 years old, and she used to watch Lily for me sometimes when I work late. Last week I called her to let her know we'd moved temporarily, and she said, Emily paused. Her voice shifted slightly, not breaking, but moving towards something. She said she'd always thought something felt wrong when Ryan was around, that Lily got quiet in a different way when he was there. She said she'd told herself it was nothing, that kids have moods. Emily's jaw tightened. She said she should have said something. Jax looked at her. She wasn't the only one who didn't say something. I know that. That's what I keep thinking about. Her eyes had gone somewhere internal. How many people saw something and let the story they were given fill in the part they couldn't explain? That's how he survived for 7 years, Jack said. He gave everyone a story that fit just well enough. Until Lily told you. Until Lily told me, he agreed. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she trusted you, she met you, and in 4 days she trusted you enough to tell you what happened. She looked at him with a directness that had something careful and honest in it. Why do you think that is? I thought about it, genuinely not deflecting. Because I didn't have an agenda when I sat with her, he said finally. I wasn't trying to get anything from her. I just sat there, let her talk about dinosaurs and birds. Let her be whoever she was that day. He paused. Kids know when you're not trying to manage them. Emily was quiet for a long time. Thank you, she said. Not the reflexive thank you she'd said in the first days, the obligatory one, the stunned one. This was the other kind. The kind that comes when someone has had time to understand the full weight of what they're expressing gratitude for. You don't need to thank me, he said. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm. You threw your motorcycle jacks, you broke your shoulder and 2 ribs, and you spent 2 weeks sitting in hospital chairs and parking outside buildings and building a case that nobody asked you to build. She looked at him. You could have caught her and called it done. Nobody would have thought less of you. I would have, he said simply. She held that answer for a moment. Jack's bear, Lily called from the other room. Come see the bird I'm doing. He looked at Emily. She almost smiled. He went into the room. Lily held up a page with a cardinal red carefully rendered every line inside its border. That's a good one, he said. It's accurate, she said with the satisfaction of someone reporting a fact. Cardinals are really that red. I believe you. She set it down and picked up a new page. Then she looked up at him with the silver blue eyes that had been looking at him with trust for 2 weeks now, the eyes that had found him in a hospital room and decided he was worth holding on to. Are you going to keep visiting, she said, even when we go to a real home? He sat in the chair beside her desk. Outside the room, he could hear Emily moving in the kitchen, the small sounds of someone existing in a space that was starting slowly to feel like theirs. Yeah, he said, I'm going to keep visiting. Lily nodded with the finality of someone who has received the answer they required and is now prepared to move forward. She picked up a red crayon and began on a new cardinal. In that moment, with the case filed and the warrant served, and Sandra Cho moving pieces through the system with the methodical precision of someone who intended to win, and Lily coloring carefully at her desk while Emily made coffee, 20 feet away, Jax Carter felt the particular quality of quiet that comes after sustained tension. Not the absence of weight, but the weight redistributed into something that could be carried differently. I thought about Karen Solis's son Noah, who shook on escalators. He thought about Maya Walsh, who had been 8 years old when she told her mother that Ryan had said she was strong enough. He thought about a window screen on a floor in Dayton, Ohio, and a 29-year-old doctor pressured by a phone call from a number that wasn't a hospital extension. I thought about all the machinery that Ryan Cole had built, careful, patient, methodical, and the people it had run over, and the years it had operated in the dark because nobody had been in the right position at the right moment to see the full shape of it. Then he thought about a yellow sweater and falling blonde hair against a gray sky, and himself running across concrete without thinking, and the sound of a shoulder detonating and arms staying closed. On hadn't known any of this when he ran toward her. He'd known exactly one thing: she was falling, and he was there. Everything else had followed from that. He looked at Lily, who was coloring her cardinal with the full focus of a person who intends to get the color exactly right. He thought some things start exactly the way they're supposed to start. I didn't know what came next for any of them. Not with certainty, not with the clean resolution that cases promised on paper and complicated in practice. Ryan Cole had an attorney and a pattern of patience that didn't disappear because it had been named. The road ahead was real and the road ahead was long. But right now in this room, the child was safe. Right now, that was enough. He watched her finish the cardinal. Every line inside the border, every color exactly right. The trial date was set for a Tuesday in February, 4 months after Ryan Cole was arrested outside his apartment on a Friday afternoon without resistance and without a word that wasn't directed at his attorney. Sandra Cho spent those 4 months building the kind of case that doesn't have gaps. She was meticulous in the way of someone who understood that the defense's entire strategy would be to find the gaps, and she intended to give them nothing to find. She interviewed Karen Solis 3 times, each interview more detailed than the last, each one tightening the account until every sentence was airtight. She worked with the Dayton DA's office on Noah Solis's case, which had been formally reopened in November, and which was now running parallel to Brookhaven's proceedings. She coordinated with Dr. Linda Marsh's attorney to ensure the Cincinnati fraud charge impersonating a hospital official to coerce amendment of a medical record was fully developed and documented. And she reviewed Dr. Osei's evaluation of Lily so many times that she could have recited portions of it from memory. Ryan Cole's attorney, a man named Gerald Hofstetter, who had a reputation for defense work in complex multi-jurisdictional cases and who charged fees that told you something about who usually retained him, filed 4 motions. The first 6 weeks, 2 were denied immediately. 1 was partially granted in a way that affected nothing substantial. The 4th was still pending when the trial date was confirmed, And Sandra told Jax on the phone that the pending motion was a procedural tactic and not a concern. He's testing the structure, she said, seeing if anything moves. Does anything move? Jax asked. No, she said. Nothing moves. Jax visited Mercer Street every few days through October and November, and then in December when Gloria Hennessy offered to extend the lease at a rate that was frankly too low and that Gloria insisted was simply what she charged, Emily decided to stop calling it temporary. She redecorated in the way that people redecorate when they've decided a place is theirs carefully without spending money. She didn't have, but with the specific intentionality of someone putting down roots. She moved Lily's desk to the window. She hung 3 framed prints in the living room that she'd bought at a flea market and that Lily had approved with serious consideration. She put a small plant on the kitchen windowsill that she named Gerald, which was either a coincidence or an act of psychological warfare against Ryan Cole's defense attorney, depending on how you read Emily Parker's sense of humor. Lily went back to school in November. Her teacher, a woman named Ms. Doherty, who had been teaching first grade for 22 years, called Emily at the end of Lily's first week back and said with the measured warmth of someone who had seen a lot of children come through a lot of circumstances that Lily was doing remarkably well and that she was in Ms. Dougherty's professional assessment, one of the most precise colorers she had ever taught. Emily relayed this to Jax on the phone that evening, and he laughed, actually laughed, the kind that comes up without planning. And it occurred to him somewhere in the middle of that conversation that this was what normal sounded like. Not the absence of everything that had happened, but something on the other side of it. The first real tremor in the 4-month build came in mid-November. Gerald Hofstetter filed a motion to exclude Dr. Osei's evaluation on the grounds that Lily's statements had been elicited in a context that was connected to the prosecution's investigative process and therefore could not be considered a neutral assessment. It was a reach, Sandra told Jax. It was a reach, but it was a smart reach, the kind that made judges have to think carefully before denying it. The judge took 8 days to deny it. 8 days during which Jax woke up every morning aware of the motion and went to bed every night aware of it and said nothing about it to Emily because Emily was holding herself together through sheer determination and didn't need the weight of procedural uncertainty added to everything else she was already carrying. Sandra called him the morning the denial came through. OC's evaluation stays in, she said, and her voice had the particular flatness of someone who has been holding a breath for 8 days and has just let it out through professional restraint. Good, Jax said. Hofstetter will try something else. That's what he does. What's next? He's going to go after Karen Solis's credibility. He's been pulling her background for 2 months. I've been watching his discovery requests. He's looking for anything that paints her as unstable or vindictive. Sandra paused. He won't find much. She's a warehouse worker taking night classes who raised a kid by herself after a man cleaned out her savings account. Juries understand that woman. And Dr. Marsh. Dr. Marsh is his bigger problem, Sandra said. A physician who documented evidence of abuse was coerced into amending her record by someone impersonating a hospital official and has spent 4 years carrying that. That's not a witness he can dismiss. He's going to try to suggest she's seeking redemption and her account is therefore colored by guilt. She paused, which is a terrible strategy because the call logs proving the hospital extension didn't exist are not colored by anything. They're phone records. Jax thought about that. He's running out of angles. He has one angle left, Sandra said. He's going to put Ryan on the stand. The line was quiet for a moment. He's going to testify, Jax said. It's a risk. Defense attorneys usually don't do it. But Hofstetter's a smart man and he understands that the patterned evidence, 3 children, 3 cities, 7 years is devastating if the jury has nothing to put against it. Ryan on the stand, calm and articulate, and presenting as a reasonable person who has been the victim of a coordinated campaign is the only thing that creates reasonable doubt. She paused. It's also the moment Ryan Cole has been preparing for his entire adult life. I is very good at being believed. He's been practicing, Jax said. Yes, which is why I've spent 4 months preparing my cross-examination. Sandra's voice was steady. I'm ready for him. Soon. Jax did not attend the trial. This was a deliberate decision and not an easy one. Sandra had been clear that his presence in the courtroom every day, a large tattooed Hells Angels member sitting in the gallery, would give Hofstetter material to work with an image, to point to a suggestion about the nature of the forces assembled against his client. So Jack stayed away and got his information through Frank, who attended every day in civilian clothes, and through Sandra's end-of-day calls. Karen Solis testified on day 2. Frank texted while it was happening. She's steady, really steady. And then 20 minutes later, Hofstetter tried to go after her on the joint account. She turned it around on him, said yes, he had access because I trusted him. That's what he does. And then a final text after the cross-examination concluded jury was with her. You could feel it. Dr. Marsh testified on day 4. Sandra had prepared her for the redemption angle, the suggestion that guilt had colored her account, and Dr. Marsh had prepared her answer, which she delivered on the stand with the quiet precision of a person who has rehearsed something so many times it has become simply true. I amended that record because I was manipulated into doing so by someone who impersonated a hospital official. I am not here because I feel guilty. I am here because a phone record proved I was lied to, and a child in Brookhaven survived what Maya Walsh survived in Cincinnati, and I am a physician. She paused on the stand, and the courtroom was quiet, and then she said, I am done amending my assessment. Frank texted that one in full because he'd written it down. Jax read it in the parking lot of a gas station in Brookhaven and sat with it for a long moment. Deborah Walsh testified on day 5 by video link from Tennessee. She was not polished and she was not strategic, and that was, Frank said afterward, exactly what made her devastating. She was a mother on a screen talking about her daughter in the direct, undefended way of someone who has stopped trying to manage how they appear and has decided just to tell the truth. She talked about Maya. She talked about what Maya had told her. Ryan said I was strong enough. And she talked about the moment she decided to believe it was a misunderstanding, and her voice didn't break when she said it, but something in her face did the specific fracture of a woman describing the worst decision of her life. I wanted it to be a misunderstanding, Deborah Walsh said to the camera, to the courtroom, to the jury of 12 people who were going to carry the weight of this. I wanted it so badly that I made it into one, and I have not stopped wanting to go back and make a different choice every day since. Hofstetter's cross-examination lasted 11 minutes. He had nothing. Ryan Cole took the stand on day 7. Frank called Jax from the courthouse steps during the lunch break, and his voice had a quality in it that Jax hadn't heard from Frank in all the years he'd known him. Something between professional admiration and something colder. Something that lived in the specific emotional register of watching a predator perform. He's good, Frank said. I want you to know that up front. He's very, very good. Tell me. Calm, measured, sad in the way that reads as genuine grief rather than performance. He talked about Lily in the way that Jax, if I didn't know what I know, I would believe him. He's had his entire life to practice being believed, and it shows. Frank paused. He said the accident devastated him. He said he's spent every night since then asking himself what he could have done differently. He said he loved Emily and Lily, and that what's happened to him, the arrest, the loss of his job, the coordinated campaign by people connected to the Hells Angels, has been the most painful experience of his life. Jax was quiet. He almost cried, Frank said. He didn't quite. It was extremely controlled, like someone who has learned that almost crying is more believable than crying. What did the jury look like? Frank was quiet for a moment. Mixed. Some of them were with him, a few of them. He paused. Enough to matter if Sandra doesn't land the cross. The afternoon session started at 1:15. Frank texted at 1:41, Sandra's up. Then nothing for 22 minutes, which was 22 minutes of Jack sitting in his apartment with the phone face up on the table and not touching it. At 2:03, Frank called. She destroyed him, Frank said, and his voice was very quiet in the specific way of someone who has just witnessed something they don't want to minimize with too many words. I mean, she had his phone records from the day of the Cincinnati call. She put the number on a screen in front of the jury, and she put the hospital's switchboard records next to it, and she asked him to explain to the jury why the number that called Dr. Marsh and identified itself as the hospital legal department was registered to a prepaid phone purchased at a drugstore in Cincinnati 3 days before the call. Jack stopped breathing for a second. He didn't know she had it, Jack said. He did not know she had it. Frank paused. The prepaid phone. She'd found the purchase through the retail transaction records. Tyler's contact helped pull it. Sandra did the rest. It's a burner phone. He bought a burner phone 3 days before the call that pressured Dr. Marsh into amending her report. Another pause. She asked him to explain it. He asked for a moment to confer with his attorney. The judge gave him 2 minutes. And then, he came back and said he had no explanation for the phone record, Frank said. He said it calmly, like he was reporting a weather fact. And that was the moment. Frank's voice had something in it now, not triumph, something more tired and more real than triumph. That was the moment the jury saw what he actually is, because an innocent man doesn't have no explanation. An innocent man is confused. An innocent man says, "That can't be right, let me see it." A guilty man who has been caught says he has no explanation in a controlled voice because he's already calculating the next move. Jack sat in the silence of his apartment. "She got him," he said. "Sandra Cho got him," Frank confirmed. "She got him clean." The jury deliberated for 9 hours across 2 days, which Sandra told Jax afterward was actually a sign of care rather than doubt. A jury that deliberates fast either finds the case simple or is already decided before they walk in. A jury that deliberates carefully is a jury that is taking the weight of the decision seriously. They came back on a Thursday morning. Guilty on the felony child endangerment charge in Brookhaven. Guilty on the fraud charge related to the Cincinnati hospital record. The Dayton case, Noah Solis, would proceed separately, and the Brookhaven conviction would be entered into that record. Sandra called Jax at 10:43 Thursday morning, and her voice was the voice of someone who has won something that mattered and knows that winning it doesn't undo everything that preceded it, but also knows that losing it would have been worse. "It's done," she said. "Sentencing," Jax asked. 8 to 12 on the endangerment charge, 3 additional on the fraud. He'll be eligible for parole review in 7 years, but with the Dayton case pending and the pattern on record, the parole board is going to have a complete picture. She paused. "He's not walking out of this, Jax." He sat with that for a moment. "Thank you," he said, "for doing it right." "That's the only way to do it," Sandra said. And then after a brief pause, "How's the shoulder? Better than it was?" "Good. Go tell that little girl she can stop worrying." He drove to Mercer Street. Emily opened the door before he knocked because she'd been watching from the window, and he could see from her face that she already knew she'd been following the trial through Sandra's daily briefings, and she'd been waiting for this call since the jury went out 2 days ago. She looked at him. He nodded once. Emily Parker stood in her doorway and took in a long, slow breath through her nose and let it out through her mouth, and for just a moment, 2 seconds, maybe 3, her face was not composed and was not managing anything, was just a human face absorbing something enormous. Then she stepped back and let him in. "Lily's at school," she said. Her voice was steady again. "I wanted to be here when I found out. I didn't want her to see my face until I knew what my face was going to do." "Smart," he said. She went to the kitchen and put on coffee, which was what Emily did when she needed to have her hands doing something while her mind did something harder. He sat at the kitchen table and watched her and said nothing for a while. "Us to 12 years, she said, still facing the coffee maker. "Yes. He's going to be in a cell for 8 years minimum." She wasn't saying it with satisfaction. She was saying it the way you say numbers that finally mean something. Noah Solis is 9 years old. He'll be 17 before the earliest possible parole. "Maybe older," Jack said. "The Dayton case runs separate." Emily nodded. She poured 2 cups and brought them to the table and sat down across from him. She looked at her coffee, then she looked at him. "My neighbor, Mrs. Garrett," she said, "the one who used to watch Lily. I called her last week and told her what was happening, what was really happening." She paused. She cried for about 10 minutes. Then she said, "I knew something was wrong, Emily. I should have said something. And I told her the same thing you told me." She met his eyes. "That's how he survived. He gave everyone a story that fit just well enough." "Yes," Jack said. "I don't want Lily to grow up believing that silence is how you survive things," Emily said. It came out with more force than her quiet voice usually carried, and she seemed to feel it land and didn't pull it back. "I don't want her to learn that the way you protect yourself is by not saying the thing you see." "She already knows different," Jack said. "She said it in a hospital room 4 days after she survived it, to a stranger in a leather jacket." He looked at Emily steadily. "You raised a child who trusts her own voice. That didn't happen by accident." Emily looked at him. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't look away. "You think so?" "She named a stuffed dog Chester because she said names were important and you should take time with them," he said. "She researched the accurate colors of blue jays before she colored them. She told me what happened on that balcony in the same tone she used to tell me about dinosaurs, because she'd decided I was someone worth telling. He paused. That's not luck. That's who she is. Emily wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and looked at the table. When she looked back up, something in her face had shifted into a place that was not sadness and not quite peace, but something that lived between them, the particular emotional territory of a person who has come through something real and is beginning to understand what they're going to be on the other side of it. What do we do now? She said. You go pick up your daughter from school, he said. You bring her home, and you keep going. I was there when Emily picked up Lily that afternoon. He waited in the car while Emily went in, and when they came out, Lily was wearing her backpack and holding a piece of paper that turned out when she climbed into the back seat and showed it to him over the headrest, to be a painting she'd done in art class, a bird red with every feather in its proper place. Cardinal, she said. Ms. Dougherty says I have an eye for color. Ms. Dougherty is right, Jack said. Lily looked at him with the silver blue eyes that had been looking at him with a particular quality of trust for 4 months now. She studied his face the way she studied most things, directly, carefully, taking time with it. Something happened today, she said. He looked at Emily in the rearview mirror. Emily gave him a small nod. Yeah, he said. Something happened. Good things happened today. Lily processed this. Because of the court, she said. Children picked up more than adults remembered to account for. Emily had been careful, but Lily was Lily. Because of a lot of people who worked hard, he said, and because you were brave enough to tell the truth. Lily was quiet for a moment, looking at her cardinal. Dr. Patricia said that too, she said, that telling the truth was brave. She looked at the painting. I don't think it was brave. I just said what happened. That's what brave usually is, Jack said. You just say what happened. She accepted this with odd, the way she accepted most things that she found sufficiently logical, and she turned the cardinal over in her hands and looked at the back of it. Jack's bear, she said. Yeah. Are you going to be around a lot after everything is finished? He looked at the question the way it deserved to be looked at. Not deflecting, not reaching for something comfortable that wasn't true, but honestly the way Lily conducted almost all of her business. Yeah, he said. I'm going to be around a lot. Okay, she said, satisfied. Chester will be glad. 3 weeks after the verdict, the brothers from the club showed up at Mercer Street on a Saturday morning with enough food to feed 20 people and the particular loud, overlapping, slightly chaotic energy of a group of large men who do not know how to do anything small. Frank brought a folding table because the kitchen table wasn't big enough. Tyler brought a cake from a bakery he wouldn't identify, which had Lily written on it in careful red frosting, and a small cardinal made of sugar in the corner, which made Lily stand in front of it for a full 30 seconds in absolute silence before pronouncing it the best cake she had ever seen in her personal life. Marcus Webb, who almost never spoke in social situations, said to Emily while she was pouring coffee that her daughter was the most serious 5-year-old he'd ever met, and Emily said, she comes by it honestly, and Marcus almost smiled, which for Marcus was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Danny Reyes brought his guitar because Danny always brought his guitar, and nobody asked him to play it, but nobody told him not to. And by the afternoon, he was in the corner, doing a quiet version of something that wasn't quite country and wasn't quite anything else but fit the room, the way certain music fits rooms without anyone being able to explain why. Lily sat next to Jax on the couch at some point in the mid-afternoon without announcement, simply relocating herself from the floor, where she'd been coloring, to the cushion beside him, and she leaned against his arm the way a child leans against something they've decided is permanent. This is loud, she said. Yeah, he said. I like it, as she said, and went back to her coloring. He looked across the room at Emily, who was talking to Frank with a cup of coffee and laughing at something, actually laughing. The full version, not the careful, managed version she'd been using in the first weeks when she was holding everything tight, and something in Jax's chest moved in the way things move when you see something you've been hoping for finally exist in front of you. The men around that table, rough men, men who had not come from gentle places, men who carried histories that most of the world would judge without understanding, were the people who had shown up. They'd run searches and made calls and sat outside buildings in the cold and built a case when nobody asked them to. They'd found Gloria Hennessy and a stuffed bear in a 2-story building on Mercer Street and made it into something that could hold a woman and her daughter while the ground stabilized under them. The world had decided what these men were a long time ago, And the world had been wrong in the specific way the world is always wrong when it decides what a person is from the outside. 2 months later, in the early spring on a Saturday that had enough warmth in it to feel like a promise, Jax pulled up to Mercer Street on the Road King, the one that had been repaired, the one that had been under a tarp in the club garage for 4 months. While Jax's shoulder healed and the trial concluded and he knocked on the door, Lily answered it. She looked at the motorcycle on the street and then at him, and her eyes went wide in the specific way of a child who has been waiting for something and has just seen it arrive. "Is that yours?" she said. "The repaired version," he said. "Good as new." She came down the steps with her shoes already on because she'd apparently been ready for this even though nobody had said anything about this, which was one of the things about Lily that continued to astonish him. She was ready for things before they happened. "Can I see it?" she said. He walked her around it the way you walk someone around something that matters. She touched the chrome with one finger carefully, the way she touched most things she considered valuable. She looked at the handlebars and the seat and the engine and the panel where the paint had been redone, which the man at the shop had matched exactly. "This is what you threw," she said. "Yes." She looked at it for a long moment. "Were you scared?" "When I threw it, when you saw me falling." He thought about it honestly. "Not in the way that stops you," he said. "More like the kind of scared that makes you move." Lily considered this. "That's the good kind of scared," she said. "Yeah," he said. "That's the good kind." Emily came out onto the steps, and the three of them stood there in the early spring morning with the motorcycle on the street and Danny Reyes's truck pulling up because he'd heard there was a plan to ride out to the park, and he had nothing better to do, and Frank's car behind him because Frank had heard the same thing, and Marcus texting from 3 blocks away asking if there was room. There was always room? Lily looked at all of this happening and then looked at Jax. "Jax Bear," she said. "Yeah. You didn't know us before." "No," he said. "I didn't. But you came back every day anyway." "Every day," he said. She looked at the motorcycle, then she looked at him. Then she said with the simple, exact, unhurried certainty of a 5-year-old who takes time with the things that matter, "Your family." Jackson Carter looked at this small girl in the early spring light. This child who had survived 15 floors and a man who wanted her silenced and 4 months of legal proceedings and all the weight of what had come before, and who was standing on a sidewalk in Brookhaven telling him something that he had known for weeks but hadn't had the words for. He crouched down to her level. "Yeah," he said, "I am." Lily nodded once the same decisive nod. She gave everything she determined to be true and permanent and turned back to look at the motorcycle with proprietorial interest. "Someday," she said, "I want to learn to ride." "Someday," he said, "I'll teach you." She accepted this the way she accepted every promise that she believed, which was without drama, without requiring confirmation, simply folding it into the architecture of what she knew to be real. Emily put her hand on Jax's shoulder briefly as she passed him to get her jacket. A light touch, the touch of someone who has learned to say certain things without words, because they've discovered that the person they're saying them to doesn't need the words, and he understood it for exactly what it was. They loaded into vehicles and drove out to the park, this strange, assembled group of people who had not chosen each other and who had become something to each other anyway, which was the only way it ever really happened. Not by design, not by declaration, but by showing up repeatedly in the same direction until showing up became the definition of what you were to each other. Lily held a coloring book in her lap for the drive, and when they got to the park, she set it on the picnic table and opened it to a blank page and looked at Jax. "What should I draw?" she said. He sat across from her at the table with the spring air moving around them and the sounds of the club brothers setting up food and Frank telling someone they'd brought too much potato salad, which was not a thing you could bring too much of, and Emily laughing at something Marcus said. The full real laugh, the one that came all the way out. "Draw whatever you want," he said. Lily picked up a red crayon. She bent over the page with the full focused attention she brought to everything that mattered, and she began to draw, and she drew with the precision and the patience and the quiet confidence of a child who has learned that what you make carefully enough becomes something real. She drew a bear on a motorcycle. She drew it exactly right. And in the small city of Brookhaven on a Saturday morning in early spring, surrounded by the people who had run toward her when the world ran the other way, Lily Parker drew inside every line, and not one color was out of place, and the sun came through the trees the way it does when winter is finished and the season has finally fully turned. And that was the beginning of what came after, which was not perfect and was not easy and was not anything like the life any of them had planned. But was theirs genuinely and completely theirs, built from the one thing that has always mattered more than blood or history or reputation or anything the world decides to think it knows about a person. The one thing is this: when someone is falling, you run toward them. Everything